Hey guys, today I want to talk about The Weeknd's latest film, Hurry Up Tomorrow, because I just can't stop thinking about it. I was lucky enough to see an early screening of this film. So today I want to do a spoiler-free review and then a spoiler discussion about what I make of the film. I'm going to try keep it vague for the spoiler-free section because I do think if you are interested in this film, it's worth going in blind. The big question I had going into this movie was, is this going to be sort of a puff piece made for like super fans of The Weeknd, or is this going to work as an actual movie? Because the thing is, right, this is an actual movie. It's released in theaters, it's having a big theatrical run, put out by an actual studio. It's starring Jenna Ortega and Barry Keoghan, as well as The Weeknd himself. It's also directed by Trey Edward Schultz, who's done great films. I love Waves, and I love It Comes at Night. I also love a lot of The Weeknd's music, so I was really looking forward to this. And my biggest hope was that this was going to work as a film. I could, kind of show members of my family if they were vaguely interested in sort of a psychedelic thriller or whatever this movie was going to be. I wanted this to work as an actual movie. And my big thing with this movie is it kind of half works as an actual movie for a while and then transitions into something that is really just for Weeknd fans. And I'm kind of struggling to make sense of it. So let's just talk about it. The film looks absolutely dazzling. I love how the film looks. I love that it was clearly shot on film. The lights are gorgeous. The framing is beautiful. It has the same visual style and sound design as the best of Euphoria. And even though people really rag on Euphoria, I think that show's biggest strength is its visuals and its kind of like sound design. And I think this really reminds me of that. It is similar to Waves as well, if you've seen that. On top of that, I actually think the story here at the start is setting up some pretty interesting ideas. I think even if you weren't a fan of The Weeknd and just vaguely knew of him, I think he does a good job of playing a fictionalized version of himself. That was what I was kind of most excited about. Was it felt like for a while they were really setting up an interesting story, a potential thriller, a potential romance. The story kicks off with The Weeknd slash Abel Tesfaye performing a string of concerts and starting to struggle with his voice. He's starting to lose his voice, the ability to hit these notes and perform. Meanwhile, while he's struggling with this, there is a woman named Anima, I believe, played by Jenna Ortega, who sets a house on fire and then flees. All right. So she's on the run from whoever she set alight in the house, whatever she did to that house. She's running away from home. We don't know whether it's a parent or an ex lover. We don't know if she's a scorn lover or a runaway from home. But regardless, she's leaving, and you're kind of cutting between these two characters and their own struggles before they finally kind of unite at this concert where his voice gives out. And I'm not going to give away anything more than that. But when it was setting this up, I was actually really kind of interested. I was keen to know more about Jenna Ortega's character. I was keen to watch The Weeknd kind of navigate his vocal issues. It's established early on that it's more psychological rather than physical. The Weeknd has talked about this. It's based on a real experience he was going through where it wasn't actual just vocal nodes. It was more a psychological hang up that was getting in the way of him performing. And I was really interested to see these pieces come together. I was also really enjoying when the movie was more interpretive, more artsy, more vibey and surreal. I really enjoyed the slow pacing with minimal dialogue. It felt like every single word that was spoken was purely all we needed to know, if that makes sense. It's very limited early on. Interactions between Abel and his manager, played by Barry Keoghan, tell you exactly what they need to know and nothing more. So as a result, you're kind of hanging on every word in a really good way. I really enjoyed the visuals kind of doing the storytelling, and I was sitting there being like, who was Jenna Ortega setting alight? What was going on? I'm keen to find out more. But unfortunately, I think where I've been struggling to kind of piece it together is all of a sudden it goes from this really kind of limited word movie, right? This almost silent film with limited dialogue and far more interpretive. It then transitions to something where the characters are now having big revelations, kind of back and forth, where you're sort of sitting there being like, well, how do you know this much about that person? How do you know this much about that person? Is that a fair characterization? I was sitting there towards the end being like, is what that character's saying about that character true, or are they just nuts? Am I meant to know? Is this the point of the movie? It transitioned into a movie where I felt like I was watching a great season finale, like genuinely quite a compelling idea. but I haven't seen the rest of the season, which I think is a shame. So if that makes any sense, if the movie kept this vibey, atmospheric, limited dialogue vibe all the way to the end, I wouldn't have had this issue. But when it goes swinging for big narrative twists and turns and kind of character face-offs in a way, I was like, I don't know enough about these two or three characters for this to really land. However, there is a potential defense that Weekend fans are going to give, and that I was thinking about in the drive home, that might make this movie hold together better. But in order to talk about that, I will need to go into full spoiler talk. So if you haven't seen the film and you just want to know my issues and my positives about the film, stick around because I'll run through it in depth. If not, go watch the movie and come back to this video. But before I get into the spoiler section, if you're thinking about seeing this movie, if you're a massive Weekend fan, I actually think go see it. It's actually pretty good, all right? It's like a 6 out of 10, a 7 out of 10. It's not bad if you're a massive Weekend fan. But unfortunately, if you're not a Weekend fan, I'm actually not sure. I'm not sure this will work. I'm not sure this will land, because where the movie goes really requires you to give a lot of benefit of the doubt and also kind of be a super fan. So let's get into spoiler talk. Leave now. 3, 2, 1. So let's just quickly run through the plot, because it's really not that convoluted. So as I mentioned, the Weeknd is struggling with his voice giving out. He then, blows his voice on stage, and while he's panicked and looking around in the crowd, General Ortega, who we've seen run from burning down a random house in the very start of the movie, is in the crowd. They lock eyes. He runs off the stage. She runs out of the crowd. They bump into each other and they go on an adventure. And at this point, I was fucking loving it. I liked this kind of fable feeling to the movie. This idea that, Abel is from one walk of life. He's up here in terms of success and status and finance and power. She's someone who looks like she's running from a troubled home, and they're like two inevitable forces just colliding and coming together. I really, really liked that vibe. I really fucking loved it. Just watching these two stories converge in a satisfying way. So I enjoyed that. They're going on like vibey dates. It's very atmospheric. I was enjoying that too. I love the visuals of them wearing the kind of clear masks that hide their identities. It was good. It was really good. Where the movie kind of takes a bit of a turn is when we get to the hotel room. So essentially, the Weeknd's run away from his manager, Barry Keoghan, who seems to kind of push him past his limits, not listen to his concerns. Feels like Barry Keoghan is representing kind of the Weeknd's internal pressure to keep performing despite what it does to himself, So whether these two characters played by Jenna Ortega and Barry Keoghan are just in the Weeknd's head, we'll talk about later. But for now, let's just go with the literal reading. Barry Keoghan pushed him too far. The Weeknd is ignoring his calls. They now go to a hotel room. The Weeknd shows Jenna Ortega's character, Anima, I think her name is Anima. He shows her this song he's working on, which is really personal. The movie's telling us it's really personal and really powerful. I'm going to be honest, not my favorite song of the Weeknd's. I don't find it particularly powerful the way the movie was telling me it was. And that's kind of an issue you run into throughout this movie. It feels a bit self-congratulatory at times. But again, we need to kind of get into the full ending to really figure out if that's the movie's intention. But at this point, I was sort of sitting there being like, it's not the deepest song I've ever heard. Like I've heard The Weeknd do more poetic stuff than the title track of Hurry Up Tomorrow. But regardless, he shows Jenna Ortega the song. She starts crying and says she feels like it's about her. The Weeknd at one point says he wishes this could last forever. The next day they have a big fight because The Weeknd needs to continue his tour and leave her behind, essentially. They had fun. They don't clarify. I don't think they had sex. They didn't show it, and I appreciate that it's trying to be more vague and kind of symbolic. But regardless, she is a woman scorned. She's furious that they've connected, at least emotionally, and he was saying, I wish this could last forever, and now he's leaving. This leads to the scene that's been blowing up on Twitter that people have been mocking, where the Abel is like, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. I have to go on tour. Blah, blah, blah.
Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Shut up.
And you know what? Is it manly? No. Is it particularly stoic in its performance? Is he super cool? No. Is this bad acting though? Also, no. This is typical emotionally immature fuckboy behavior. This reminded me of how I used to argue when I was a teenager. It reminds me of other people I know. People have been saying this is a bad performance. I kind of disagree. I think they think The Weeknd is wanting to be cool, but I think this is a self-critique, and I actually think he did a good job in this scene. To me, it was the best acting of the fucking movie, to be honest. Where he failed was when he's in a sort of hostage situation later in the movie and is trying to be panicked. But regardless, this leads to Jenna Ortega crashing out, and she bashes The Weeknd over his head, and now he's in this like almost dream-like state for quite a substantial chunk of the movie, delving into his own psychology. So it's this big dream sequence where he talks to seemingly his younger self, walks through city streets that are completely empty, which visually was beautiful. I love the hotel section as well that was completely empty. I really liked the visuals in this section. There's also a section early on that I forgot to mention where he's in the bath and he goes through a sleep paralysis episode where he's like stuck in the water and like there's a black figure in the corner. The Weeknd has talked about the fact that the Hurry Up Tomorrow album deals with his kind of going through sleep paralysis phase. Like he was having that a lot, and this movie visualizes that as well. And The Weeknd has talked about in interviews about how this is explored in the movie. I don't want to be mean, but it's not, it kind of rubs me as a slight first world problem. I feel like most of us at home have probably gone through sleep paralysis before when we were like 15 and not felt the need to make an album and a movie about it. I'm trying not to be an asshole, but like hearing a 35-year-old man talk about how like it's super terrifying and thought this was a worthy experience to rest a whole album on feels a bit strange to me. Like, I'm not trying to be a hater, but like I was 16, I went, okay, when I sleep on my back and don't move, it triggers sleep paralysis. So I'll sleep on my side if I feel like that's going to happen, and I'll put on an eye mask if it keeps happening. Like, I don't know, man.
Main concepts of this film is sleep paralysis. There are no antagonists in this film. I think that sleep paralysis is the enemy, and that is something that, you know, I was really dealing with, still am to this day. Not as much as before, but they're very vivid. They're very vivid nightmares. You're in bed and you're awake. You're asleep but awake, half asleep, half awake, and you're aware of your surroundings, but you can't move. You're paralyzed for almost a minute, and sometimes you see a shadowy figure in the corner, and you hear whatever those voices. Sweet nothings. It's saying nothing, essentially, but they're voices. I did my research on it, and it's lack of sleep, right? Your brain is still awake when you're asleep. My biggest medicine for it is just turn your phone off, you know, turn the TV off, turn all the lights off. I usually get it when I leave a light on. That your brain is kind of still awake. The irony is it's got to all be dark and scary for you to sleep through the night.
But regardless, moving forward, the movie ends in basically this misery-like section. Now, The Weeknd has said in interviews that he wanted this to be kind of a modern take on misery, and this is where I'm a bit like head-scratchy, because up until this point, I actually really quite liked the movie. The dream sequence I thought went on a little long, but that's okay. Jenna Ortega has now tied up The Weeknd and starts kind of showing him his own songs in order to try get him to have a mental breakthrough, right? So it looks like she's going to set him alight unless they can come to some common ground. And she does this by playing the most obvious Weeknd songs you could. So she plays Blinding Lights to him, and she's like, this song, it sounds upbeat, but if you listen to the lyrics, like, you actually realize that it's about you being sad that you're not connecting with this girl. And I'm sort of like, is this meant to be game-breaking information? Again, if this is the point, if the point of Jenna Ortega's character is that she's a normie fan that thinks this is an exciting revelation, then sure, technically the movie's doing a good job. But given the fact that what the ending of the movie seems to imply is that Jenna and Barry might just be figment of The Weeknd's imagination, which people have been spamming on my TikTok comments as well. So I don't think this is like an uncommon read. On top of that, Jenna Ortega's name is Anima, which means the feminine side of a man or something like that. I'll flash up the definition on here, but it feels very on the nose. And so if this is meant to be part of The Weeknd's psyche talking to himself and as a result talking to the audience, I don't know if this interpretation of Blinding Lights is that profound. And it again, it kind of feels like a bit of self-congratulatory jerk off a bit. Like just watching this baddie jump around on the bed being like, blinding lights is actually genius because even though it sounds upbeat, it's actually not. And this might be a reference to American Psycho. Like it might be going full American Psycho, but it was a bit much. On top of that, then she goes, oh, you know what? Gasoline was an underrated song. I agree. I love Gasoline. It was an underrated song, but again, hearing General Ortega be like, you see, if you listen to Gasoline, you actually realize that it's all about like your longing to self-harm and self-destruct. It's like, yeah, no. I think most people that listen to these songs got it. And again, I can't tell if this is intentional or not. I can't tell if I am meant to be thinking this and meant to be thinking these observations are shallow, or whether I'm meant to be like, oh wow, the Weeknd's having an awakening. Because to be fair, the Weeknd in this scene seems like, oh my god, get this crazy bitch away. I think the big thing here though is it leads to this moment where essentially what they're going for is the Weeknd realizes that it's maybe time to leave the Weeknd behind. On top of that, it's maybe time to stop blaming all the women he's ever been with for the issues in the relationship and realize that he is also creating issues. It's almost like a self-therapy session. And on one end, I think a movie being made just so Abel at the age of 35 can come to terms with the fact that maybe I'm the problem, it's me, does feel a little like, I don't know, man. Like, I'm gonna be honest, like you're 35, you've never realized that maybe like yelling on the phone and calling a woman a selfish bitch, even if she did fuck you over a bit or not, or did break your heart, like does it really take a movie and an album to realize that that maybe isn't the best way to handle it? Is it really like, I don't know, it just felt like toxic fuckboy goes to therapy for the first time. And on one end, I'm sort of like, good on you for doing that. Good on you for doing that self-reflection. But I also feel like this is an arc the Weeknd has already gone on. His first three albums were these intensely sexually depraved, dark albums. You look at the album covers and they're pretty nuts. They're pretty heavy. And then My Dear Melancholy and his kind of pop edge music started coming out. And it was very reflective on the damage he causes externally, the fact that he now feels in the position that he put women in growing up. And yeah, just watching this movie that has all the pieces to be a masterpiece essentially boiled down to the Weeknd realizing that maybe it isn't great to swear and focus on work and be awful to your partners if they set reasonable boundaries or just have to end a relationship with you. It does feel just a little like, was this enough of a story? And the thing is, if you wanted to go for a movie where it was just a retelling of Misery, right? If you wanted to go for a movie where it was just crazy fan Jenna Ortega tries to kill the Weeknd, I think that could have been a campy thrill ride. It could have been really good. But as I was saying before, when this felt like a season finale for a show that I hadn't watched any of the other episodes of, I was sitting there watching these revelations and this interplay between Jenna Ortega's character and the Weeknd's character being like, if I don't know anything about the Weeknd's career, if I was just watching this as a movie and even knowing what I know about his career and what I've seen in the sparse interviews as well as the Idol, all of this stuff combined, I am sort of sitting there being like, I don't know if I spent enough time with this version of The Weeknd in this movie and this version of Jenna Ortega for these character moments to land. And the only defense for this paper-thin characterization is that Barry Keoghan, Jenna Ortega are both parts of The Weeknd's psyche battling it out. So Barry Keoghan is the, I need to be a super successful alpha dog music star, fuck that bitch, don't think about her. And Jenna Ortega is the one that's like, no, actually reflect on your relationships. Maybe music and money and all this isn't the answer. Maybe you need to make more heartfelt music, whatever. And they're parts of his psyche battling it out. And Jenna Ortega wins, right? Because that's what the Weeknd needs right now. I think that's a fair interpretation based off the fact that after he gets set free from the bed, we don't really see Barry Keoghan again, or, there's no real police investigation. He just walks back out of the hotel room onto the stage, suggesting the cycle repeats, right? So it's this constant inner battle that the Weeknd has about hanging it up, doing self-reflection, leaving his career behind. So I think the movie does work better if you go, it's all in their head. But again, it doesn't really land as a super powerful twist. And I actually really enjoyed and was really interested to find out more of Jenna Ortega's character. So if it is the idea that they're just in his head and it's just parts of his psyche battling it out, it doesn't work as well as an actual narrative movie that is worth paying price of admission to see when you've got, you know, other movies coming out like Mission Impossible or something, you know, like it's not the type of movie that I would say go see that over Midsommar or Hereditary or something or any other thing A24 is putting out, because ultimately the way the film goes, it really just needs you to be a massive Weeknd fan and find this inner turmoil compelling, because I don't think the movie within its own universe does a good job of making the Weeknd a compelling character, so much so that you are interested in seeing parts of his psyche battle it out. And if it's not parts of his psyche battle it out, I fundamentally don't think the movie comes together at the end. I think it's a shame, because the first hour, maybe even hour 20, I was absolutely loving, but there was no intensity or stakes. I wasn't sitting there being like, oh my God, get that crazy bitch off you, she's going to kill you. I wasn't sitting there hoping he gets back or even hoping he makes up with his girlfriend. It was really, I don't think the movie did a particularly good job of making me invest and care about this character. And on top of that, I know some of you are probably going to say, well, Marshall, maybe the point was you weren't meant to like him. Maybe you were really meant to be against him. In which case, I'm going to say I didn't particularly hate him either. I was just kind of fly on the walling it. And again, I was okay with fly on the walling it when the movie was purely vibes. But when it gets into this big talky talk section where it's asking you to kind of grapple with what you've seen up until this point and make sense of the Weeknd as a character, I don't think it works. Now, it's not all bad. I do think The Weeknd actually did a pretty good job acting. I know that's a hot take and Twitter is really looking to destroy him. I think Barry Keoghan, weirdly enough, who is Oscar nominated, I think is excellent in Saltburn. I think is excellent in Banshees of Inisherin. I actually think kind of sucked here. Like, I don't think he was very good, to be honest. Jenna Ortega is great. I think Jenna Ortega is pretty much great in everything she's in. And I think the thing is, I sound really negative talking about this ending, but my big thing is this movie is like a solid 7 out of 10. It's actually pretty good. But unfortunately, I don't think I can recommend it to anyone that isn't a Weeknd fan. And I think it almost crossed the barrier of being a actual movie I could recommend to people. It was almost there. It was so close. And that's why I can't stop thinking about it, because I'm like, it just needed a bit of tightening in the end. Or if you wanted to be this misery like thriller, like really flesh out the characters, make it 2.5 hours, spend less time in just pure atmosphere and like make me understand what makes both of these characters tick. If you're just going to end with the whole they're in his head thing, which I do think this movie is kind of getting at with how dreamlike it feels, I guess maybe the moment he locks Barry Keoghan out of the room, it's all just this mental crisis he's having in the back room before he goes back out, I assume is what we're meant to take it as. But in that case, I think you really need to do a good job of making this compelling and interesting. And truthfully, I actually am wondering if it would have been better if we kind of had The Weeknd leaning into a more fictionalized version of himself. You know, I would have loved to find out more about his ex. I would have loved to really feel the weight and the stakes of that relationship. A lot of stuff between him and Barry, for example, the beef he's having there, as well as stuff that's brought up around the relationship with his parents, for example. In the final song, the reason Abel is set free is because he belts out this beautiful tune, which is the title song, Hurry Up Tomorrow. And Jenna Ortega is so moved that she sets him free and now he's ready to perform again. Basically saying he, I guess, found himself and wrote this beautiful piece of music and did self-reflection, and he's now ready to be a true artist or more self-reflective and be more self-aware, whatever, right? But like, I would have loved to know The Weeknd better. I would have loved to know anything about his parents so I understood why that song was landing, because as it stands, and I've listened to the song since then, I listened to the song before the movie, it's very vague writing, it's very loose lyrics, and like that's fine for a song, but when the big emotional moment of a feature film that is expected to kind of land with actual audiences, I think it needed to do a better. I think, truthfully, I think this movie, if it wanted to be really brave and bold, would have given us insight into The Weeknd, who up until this point has been a fairly elusive artist. You know, he's barely done any interviews unless it's been for The Idol and this. I would have loved to actually find out more about his dad, more about his mum, more about what this song is actually getting into. Like, can you imagine how interesting it would have been if we found out just a horrific, tragic backstory throughout this movie that is based on The Weeknd's real life, and instead of doing all these interviews, this was his like big moment to kind of reveal to the world his life story. But as it stands, when he's singing about his mum and his dad and the bathtub and all this, I'm just like, okay, like this is kind of what I knew before the movie, which is a shame. But yeah, I'm landing on a solid 7 out of 10 on this. It's pretty good. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. On top of that, if you enjoyed this video, please consider getting a membership to this channel. It's the cost of a nice cup of coffee per month, and you get access to a weekly or fortnightly podcast where I talk about everything I've watched, both shows and movies in a given week, fortnight, or month. On top of that, top tier members get to vote for a video that will land on the main channel once a month. The one for this month that has been selected is a recap and review of The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives Season 1. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and have a lovely day.